Chris. So the White House is now waiting on the fate of President Trump's travel ban.
Political analyst Ric Epps is here to break down the court proceedings. Ric, good morning. Always good to see you.
Good morning, Shelley.
So what's the current status right now of this case?
Well, right now it's sitting with the U.S., a panel of justices in the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they're, at this point, weighing the argument that's been put forth by the Justice Department as to whether this travel ban executive order that's been issued by Trump is actually valid.
They're not going to decide the constitutionality of it, whether it's going to stand or not. I was listening to the proceedings live yesterday. Ric, were you listening? I'm assuming you were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was the language and lingo that the judges were using giving us an indication of which way they're going to make their decision?
Well, I think it potentially, and even if you look at what the lawyers said on the Justice Department side, that it looks like they kind of took a sort of an attack approach toward
They did.
Which I thought was a little bit, you're like asking for trouble when you're trying to push the justices that way, particularly after the comments that were made about the justice the other day that Trump had made. So I think there is sort of setting up this sort of division, but I would say that it's slightly leading that way. I would say it's not all finalized yet, but I would say if you look at how it's set up yesterday, there's a lot of questions that the justices asked that I think that they need to be answered, and I think it's going to be interesting.
Speaking of the questions that they were asking, I mean, there were times that the attorney couldn't even get through a sentence, and there were these awkward pauses. You were right; it was almost a little bit of an attack. It felt like. Well,
particularly when you look at the commentary when the justices said, when the attorney for the Justice Department asked, basically made the comment that, well, this is really outside of you. This is a national security issue, and this is outside of your purview. And the justice said, are you trying to say that this is not we shouldn't be reviewing this? And I'm paraphrasing. And he said, yes, you shouldn't be reviewing this. And I went, okay, so you're really looking for trouble when you're trying to go down this road,
right,
as if you're trying to suggest that justices don't know their job. And it's interesting to see this division between the two areas that normally would be working somewhat cooperatively, but there's this rift between the Justice Department and the judicial branch of the government right now, which I think is important.
Yeah, I was going to say division seems to be the word, the word or the catchphrase of the day. What surprises did you see here? Because there was kind of an attack on this person, and these two departments usually work hand in hand. What were the surprises, and what's going to come out of this?
Well, I think the surprises are when you look at how this case sort of has grown wings, right? And this real issue, there's lots of issues. Religion, ethnicity, why these countries, not other countries. There's lots of things that are playing out. I think it really is setting up this crisis that could occur. And here's what the crisis might be. Let's say the Court of Appeal decides to block and continue the block on the ban. Well, this is obviously going to lead to us, it's going to be kicked up to the Supreme Court. And even if they didn't, even if they took it away, it still would go to the Supreme Court for appeal. And so at that point, you've got an interesting scenario because you have an imbalance in the court right now. You have basically 4-4. So that means that if the justices line up on each side of the political aisle, that means that, and let's say it winds up in a deadlock, that means it gets kicked back down to whatever the decision that was made by the U.S. Court of Appeals, which actually bodes well potentially for the Democrats if you look at how things have set up already. So this is the part that's interesting, and also just how the level to which the executive branch of the government has taken lengths to sort of push this agenda pretty strongly early on. And I think that sets up a pretty scary precedent to some degree, because the checks and balances that the constitutional framers put in place were there to make sure that you couldn't have the ability to usurp power and sort of without having any check in the system. So this sets up an interesting scenario.
And when are we going to hear from them?
Well, the latest is that sometime this week, that the week won't end without us having a decision. I don't think it'll come today. I certainly think certainly by tomorrow or the next day, you'll see a reaction that'll come. And I think it's going to be, from what I can see early on, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't lean toward, with some limitations. I mean, what they may do is kick this back to Trump and say, hey, you have to, change the wording in here, or let's just get some more specificity in this, and then we'll see what happens.
There's a lot of stuff going on that we haven't seen before, and it's all very new.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's pretty interesting. Ric Epps, we thank you again for your expertise.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.